I am Professor Hui-Rak Park, former Dean of the Graduate School of Politics and Leadership at Kookmin University, Seoul, South Korea. I have conducted research on North Korea's nuclear issue for many years and have recently published 14 English-language journal articles as well as 2 books in English. Through this channel, I will explain critical security issues using AI-based voice and images.
Unfortunately, in South Korean society, misunderstandings, misperceptions, and rumors spread very easily, even on national security issues.
Why does this happen? Let me be blunt. I believe it's because of what I call the Zhuge Liang syndrome. As many of you know, Zhuge Liang is portrayed in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a work of fiction, as an almost superhuman strategist. Sitting quietly in a thatched hut, he supposedly understands everything happening in the world. With no information at all, he predicts the enemy's next move with perfect accuracy. But the real Zhuge Liang was nothing like the fictional version.
Still, we confuse fiction with reality and remember Zhuge Liang as a flawless strategic genius.
And the problem doesn't stop there. In Korea and around the world, there are far too many people who believe that they, like Zhuge Liang, can sit back and fully grasp the hidden logic and flow of world affairs. Let me give you an example. Whenever North Korea launches a missile, people immediately offer confident explanations without any concrete information. It's a strategy to bring the United States to the negotiating table.
It's a calculation to seize the initiative in inter-Korean relations.
It's a political message meant to strengthen regime unity. Experts say this on TV. The public nods along. Some people even claim, both in Korea and abroad, that President Trump is a strategic genius, and that they alone understand his hidden long-term intentions and secret strategies. But if someone says, North Korea's missile launches are mainly about improving performance, that person is criticized as someone who knows nothing. If someone argues that President Trump made foreign policy decisions impulsively or emotionally, they are dismissed as ignorant. The same applies to claims of election fraud, raised not only in Korea but also in the United States. Most people don't believe them. But some insist. I'm on the level of Zhuge Liang. I can tell exactly who committed election fraud, how they did it, and why. They believe they alone see a hidden conspiracy that ordinary people cannot. But let's think calmly. A real-life Zhuge Liang does not exist. Most stories about him are exaggerations, and Romance of the Three Kingdoms itself is full of fiction. If Zhuge Liang were truly all-knowing, why did his state eventually collapse? Even the famous story that he predicted the east wind at the Battle of Red Cliffs is not a historical fact. This Zhuge Liang syndrome is not unique to Korea. All over the world, many people fall into the illusion that I can see the hidden truth that others cannot. They create conspiracy theories and then end up believing them themselves. National security and defense issues are especially vulnerable to this problem. Much information is classified or unavailable. That makes these topics perfect playgrounds for imagination and speculation, because there is no clear way to verify what's true and what isn't. This applies to North Korea. It also applies to the United States. Some people claim to understand North Korea better than anyone else, despite having no real knowledge or information. Others insist they fully understand President Trump's intentions and strategy, even though they don't read English sources and have little real interest in U.S. politics or security affairs. As we've seen with issues like strategic flexibility of the U.S. forces in South Korea, THAAD deployment, and wartime operational control, once a plausible-sounding rumor about the U.S.-South Korea alliance appears in Korea, it spreads instantly. It shapes public opinion without being corrected. And when rumor-driven public opinion grows strong enough, it shakes the government. And eventually leads to bad policy decisions. Even policymakers themselves are not immune to rumors. So what is the solution? I believe there is only one. We must free ourselves from the Zhuge Liang syndrome and become more humble. We should not easily believe stories that circulate without solid evidence or reliable information. In fact, the more convincing a rumor sounds, the more cautious we should be. This is where I recommend applying Occam's razor, the principle of simplicity. The more assumptions a claim requires, and the more complex its explanation, the more likely it is to be wrong. Rather than complicated conspiracy theories, simple and common-sense explanations are far more likely to be correct. For election fraud to be real, countless people would have to conspire together. Not a single one could make a mistake, and no one could ever leak the secret. That is realistically almost impossible. The simplest explanation for North Korea's missile launches is not political messaging. It is performance improvement. If U.S. advisors and analysts assess President Trump as impulsive and driven by personal interests,
the most reasonable response is to accept that assessment.
the idea that Trump is a genius who hides everything, and I'm such a genius that I can see through it, is the textbook example of the Zhuge Liang syndrome. All of us, including myself, are very limited beings.
There are differences in intelligence, but those differences are much smaller than we like to believe. Without sufficient information, we simply do not have the ability to see through other people's intentions and strategies.
Recognizing that our own ideas may be wrong,
And being willing to revise our views when new evidence appears.
that is the only real cure for the Zhuge Liang syndrome.
And only when citizens overcome this syndrome can a healthy public debate on national security emerge. One that allows governments and militaries to design and implement sound policies.
At the very least, let us admit this much. Any of us can fall victim to the Zhuge Liang syndrome.